So casting on with socks is kind of a two-part process. First of all, you have to determine the method you're using. In this case, the double points. You need your yarn, obviously, and you need to think about what cast on you're going to use. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm actually going to use a less stretchy cast on than I would typically use for socks. Simply because all of the stretchy cast ons are a little bit fiddly, especially on double points. So I'm going to be using the long tail cast on just to show you. A later video, I will show you how to do all of the cast ons, including the really fiddly ones, and show you how to divide them for socks. But I will talk about how I divide them for socks in these videos because you might want to try one. So this first cast on, obviously long tail, it doesn't have any waste yarn, and it's fairly easy. So what I tend to do is cast on all of the stitches or half of the stitches on 1 or 2 needles. So I'm going to cast on 60, which is what I cast on for my typical sock swatch. So I'll cast on 30 stitches onto this needle, and then I'll cast 30 stitches onto this needle. And I'm going to begin with this one and then show you how to transition to the next needle. Okay, so I've got my yarn. For a long tail cast on, you are pulling out yarn that is usually 2 or 3 times the length of what your cast on will use. I usually guesstimate here. I'm not super exacting about it. That's just not really my style. And depending on your knitting style, there are some guides for how long that should be. I think you can do like a wrap around your needle to count stitches and stuff like that, but I don't do any of that. So I'm going to cast on the long tail. I do this without a slip knot. I just tap and then under, over, and then I'm actually going to do a purl stitch in between to make my life easy. So this is kind of like a variation on tubular that I'm doing right now. I think there's a way to do it that's a little cleaner, but it doesn't really matter for this demonstration. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13. Okay, so now I've got 30 and it's time to grab my other needle. This is the trickiest part for many people who are knitting with double points for the first time or casting on a small circumference for the first time. And it's really more about practice than any type of skill level, or if you don't get it right the first time, just keep trying. That's what I'm trying to say here. So we've got our stitch and we're ready for the next one, which is going to be a knit. So where I would normally take this needle and go under, I'm going to just hold this needle kind of alongside of my other and go under and get it cinched in really good. So you see how there's like a gap? I'm going to bring it as close as I can and cinch it up really good. Then I move it perpendicular to the other needle and I continue my cast on from there. Oops. So I would continue to cast on the remaining 30 stitches on this needle. All right, so now I've cast on 30 here, and I have 30 on one needle and 30 on the other for my full circumference of 60 stitches. Now, I could just go ahead and divide it, 20, 20, 20 on 3 needles and then work on the 4th needle. That is possible, but it's kind of fiddly and a little bit of a pain in the butt. So instead, I'm going to flip this like I would if I was knitting flat, and I am going to knit in pattern the whole first row flat across the first needle and then the second needle. So I would just use my double points as I traditionally would. This first stitch is a purl, and work across all the stitches in the first needle. So I'm going to do that and then come back. Okay, so I've worked across all the stitches on my first needle, and these stitches on the second needle haven't been worked yet, but I'm going to do something before I continue that will save me some time and energy later, and that's adding in the 3rd needle. After you're past your cast on row, really the stitches are much grippier. Like they have the tension right, so it's easier to come in and add in your extra needle. And I'm just going to do that from the end here by slipping the first 20 stitches. I've got that like little split. Slipping the first 20 stitches onto this needle. And yes, there is a particular way to slip this, but you need to pay attention to the orientation of your stitches anyway when you come back around. So I'm just going to slip them in a way that's easy for me, which is purl-wise, and then I'll fix them if they're not in the correct orientation when I loop back around. So I've got 30 stitches on each needle, which means that if I'm dividing them between 3 needles, I essentially want 20 on each. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now that those are nice and tight, I can spread them out, kind of isolate them in the middle if I feel more comfortable with that. If your stitches are looser, you might want to bunch them up. And then continue on this second needle, which I only have 10 stitches on, to work the next 10 from this needle. Then I'll work the remaining 10, and then I'll be able to join in the round. So I'll show you when I'm ready to join in the round. Okay, so I've got 20, 20, 20, and they're all swirled around in a tangly mess, and this had wrapped around the tail, so you want to make sure you're not getting all tangled up before you join it in the round. That is so key, as all of us know from knitting hats and whatever else. So I've got my last 20 stitches, the ones I've most recently worked, the middle 20 stitches, and what I'm going to do is make sure that my sock, the part of my sock that is the fabric, is all turned to the center. And you want to make sure that these junctions especially are straight. Luckily, this first round, even if somehow you manage to twist this, you can fix it at the junction one time. You have one chance. It's only the first round that it will be unnoticeable, but it is fixable. So I'm ready to join in the round to work around for the first time as a complete circle. I have all of my stitches towards the center. I've made sure that they're not twisted at the edges. And then all I'm going to do is kind of hold both of these needles in one hand, and I'm going to insert into this first stitch, which is a knit stitch. So I'm going to insert into it knitwise. And this is the part that gets a little fiddly, especially if you're not used to handling multiple needles. You're going to bring your working yarn around and in between, just like these were by themselves. So basically you're just ignoring the other needles. And I know that's the hardest part when you're learning to do double points. But now we have joined in the round, and it's as simple as that. So now I'm going to just work onto this existing knitting needle, and I'm going to work each needle individually as I come to it across the row, treating one needle like its own little section. And after I complete this needle, I move to the next needle and the next needle and the next needle, around and around for all of eternity until I have created a sock. So that is how you knit a sock in the round on double points.